With that, I will hand things over to Tanya for our introduction.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya Isa, and I'm a board member of the Rensselaer Plateau Alliance. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you all this evening. We're so glad you've joined us for part of this evening and for this part of the 2021-2022 lecture series. Together, we're going to learn about falconry tonight with Master Falconer Darryl Perkins. Darryl Perkins was born in Lenoir, North Carolina in 1954, and he grew up in the Bushtown section of Caldwell County. After graduating from Hibriten High School in 1972, Darryl attended Winston-Salem State University, where he majored in biology. His summers were spent working as a naturalist for the National Park Service at the peaks of Otter on the Blue Ridge Parkway near Lynchburg, Virginia. After college, Darryl served in the U.S. Army for 4 years. He is a Master Falconer and served 6 years as president of the North American Falconer Association, following a 4-year stint on the board of directors. And he served over 20 years as president of the Massachusetts Falconry and Hawk Trust. Darryl is considered an expert on the Northern Goshawk. He is the author of 2 books, Understanding Goshawks, work on their training and ecology, as well as the book Black and Brown Faces in America's Places. Darryl has graciously offered to take questions as we go along, so please put these in the chat. And now it's over to you, Darryl.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. This subject is near and dear to my heart. So if I stumble, that's on me, because I live and breathe falconry every day. I'd like to make one slight correction in the introduction. I was profiled in the book Black and Brown Faces in America's Wild Places. I'm not the author. Dudley Edmonton is a friend of mine. Dudley Edmonton is the author. I was just one of the people that was profiled in there. I guess I'll start by telling you a little bit about my introduction to falconry before I go over to the history of falconry. And the history of falconry is not vague, but if you talk to 3 or 4 different historians, you'll get 3 or 4 different answers as to the origins of falconry. But what I will tell you is are the origins in North America, most particularly in the United States. I grew up in Western North Carolina, where everybody had a farm. We were all dirt poor to our way of thinking, but everyone had at least a plow horse, for cultivating the ground. So I grew up riding horses barebacks, and when we played cowboys and Indians, which was an okay thing to do back in those days, we had actual horses, no saddles or anything like that. Of course, we raised chickens and pigs and all of our vegetables. And my grandfather shot everything that came on our property, be it a weasel, stray cat, dog. And to his mind, turkey vultures and red-tailed hawks were the mamas and the papas. Cooper's hawks and sharpshins were the babies. And so when a Cooper's hawk would come into our yard and latch onto the tail end of a Rhode Island red hen or rooster that they absolutely couldn't handle, my grandfather's thinking was that that was one of the babies just holding on until the mama and daddy got there. And as a result of that, he sacrificed many a hen to be able to shoot that Cooper's hawk. And as a kid, I found at least half a dozen shot up Cooper's hawks and horned owls and barred owls that had strayed across the no-fly zone of my grandfather. And I tried to nurse them back to health. In retrospect, I probably contributed to their demise because I gave them goody powder and Coca-Cola, which is what my grandmother gave me when I had a headache or bellyache. But nevertheless, my intentions were good. And one day, there was a red-tailed hawk sitting in a tree overlooking our cornfield. And he left the tree and he kind of flew out over the field and he folded up and dropped out of sight. And then he flew back up to the tree and he had a mouse in his talons, which he proceeded to eat. And I sat there with my mouth hung open in awe, and I thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. Another time I was fishing, but this time I was about 15 years old, and I saw a red tail fly up in the tree near where I was fishing, and it had a squirrel in its talons. So I was really hooked and interested about birds of prey at that point. Again, I remind you that I grew up in Western North Carolina, and it was dirt poor. We had no recreation center. We had no swimming pool. If you lived out in the county, you couldn't play city baseball. But the one thing that we did have was the bookmobile. And the bookmobile came through, and you could get as many books as you wanted, as long as you didn't have any delinquent books. So if I got 3, the next time the bookmobile came, I could get 3 more. And I'm in North America. Falconry started in the 1940s. Colonel Luff Meredith was one of the first persons to start falconry here, along with guys like Al Nye from Pennsylvania and Frank and John Craighead. And that they formed a club called Falconers Association of North America. And during the World War, that club ceased to exist. However, during my readings on the bookmobile, I read a book by their sister, Jean Craighead, My Side of the Mountain. And so after reading that, I was really, really hooked on being able to have one of these birds. I just didn't know how in the world I was going to be able to do that. But I was fascinated by that book, and I was determined that at some point I was going to be able to find out how to do that and become a falconer. And it's funny, later on when I've seen the movie, and I've seen it 1,000 times, the peregrine falcon is actually a prairie. The grouse is actually a pheasant. But it's like when you're a kid and you watch those Disney movies and they're using Siberian Huskies, they were all wolves to me. So when I saw that movie, that absolutely was a peregrine falcon. And I just had to have one. As noted in when she was talking about my bio, I attended Winston-Salem State University with the class of 1976. When I was a sophomore, the National Park Service came to HBCUs, or historical Black colleges and universities, and they were recruiting. There weren't a lot of minority in the Forest Service or the Interior Department, and so they were recruiting on those campuses. I took the test and was fortunate enough to be hired my sophomore year as a seasonal naturalist. My first assignment was the Peaks of Otter Visitor Center along the Blue Ridge Parkway. And while there, I did some studies along with another grad student from Maryland on the Cooper's Hawk. So you can imagine my delight that here I was, someone that's always been interested about birds of prey, and I was getting paid to go out and find Cooper's Hawks in there. So it was total nirvana for me. Excuse me. After college, I went into the Army to get money to go to grad school, and excuse me. And after I got out of the Army, in order to get my GI Bill started, I just enrolled at the local community college. And I took an intro to data processing course while I was there. And I got hooked, became a programmer, and that's been my vocation for 40 years. I never got back into the biology, but I did major in computer programming. I got a 2-year associate's degree. So my spiel to kids is the beauty of an education, in my opinion, is that it allows you opportunities. You can switch fields or grasp an opportunity that otherwise wouldn't be afforded to. And whatever success I've attained in this world, I attribute a great deal of it to the bookmobile. So here we were, no swimming pool, no baseball, none of the things that certainly the kids today have, but in those days, and we were very jealous and envious of the kids that lived in the city. They could play Little League baseball and Pop Warner football. We couldn't. All we had was the bookmobile. And so every summer, you would see kids coming off that thing loaded down with books. I read Ricky Tikki Tavi, Call of the Wild, all of Jack London's books, the Farley books about the Black Stallion. So reading and falconry and history go hand in hand to me. But back to falconry and my ascension into the sport. After I finished at Caldwell Tech, I got a job with this company called Systems Associates. They were located in Charlotte. They moved to Massachusetts, and it was while I was in Massachusetts. I saw a picture in the book, and it was a guy named Tom Cade, and he had a peregrine falcon on his fist and a pheasant in the other hand. And he was at a NAFA field meet in Centerville, South Dakota. So I did some inquiry, and I found out that he was a professor at Cornell, and was actually head of the ornithology department there. So I called him, and I finally, after months of trying to get to him, I finally reached him. I said, "My name is Darryl Perkins. I've always wanted to be a falconer. I don't know how." He said, "Well, I'll give you to my assistant. Maybe she could help you." She passed me on to his assistant, Phyllis. She in turn gave me to a gentleman named Victor Hardisley. Now, Vic was in charge of behavioral sciences at Cornell, and he was one of the founders of the P Fund, or the Peregrine Fund, which started at Cornell. And their goal, their claim to fame was reproducing peregrine falcons. So he introduced me to a gentleman in Massachusetts named Ralph Buscemi. He agreed to sponsor me for 2 years. So I was apprentice under him for 2 years. At that time, I flew a red-tailed hawk. And after that, I became a general falconer, and I got my first goshawk, and I've flown goshawks ever since 1985. So that's how a little bit how I got into the sport. And falconry is the active pursuit of a wild quarry with a trained raptor in its natural habitat. So to be practicing the sport, all 4 of those things have to happen. Now, one can be a falconer and do something else. You can be a falconer and do educational talks, as I'm doing. Or you can be a falconer and you can be a rapid salvage person who takes in birds that are injured and unable to be released, and they care for them for the balance of their days. Or you can be a rehabber, someone who takes in birds of prey or wild animals, keeps them, nourishes them, gets them back to health, and return them to the wild. And all of those vocations or avocations for some folks could be a falconer. But if you are a practicing falconer, then you actively pursue wild quarry with a trained raptor in its natural habitat. Someone catches a bunny in South Dakota and brings it to Massachusetts or North Carolina and turns it loose, and then catches that with his red-tailed hawk, in my opinion, is not practicing falconry, because that's not the quarry's natural habitat, nor is it fair chase. And for me, those things have to happen. I go out west every year that I'm able, and my children allow me to now. And I hunt jackrabbits primarily with the goshawk. I do hunt pheasant and grouse and ducks, but primarily I hunt jackrabbits. My last trip, I spent 3 weeks in Garden City, Kansas, And I think my wife and I, the warden keeps track of every dime spent on these excursions. And if I'm not mistaken, the warden calculated that my 2 jackrabbits that I cost were around $2,500. So falconry is not an act of going out and killing a lot of stuff with your bird of prey. It is an ultimate or extremely advanced form of bird watching, if you will. If you take away the hunting aspect and the fact that raptors in the wild kill to feed themselves, and in falconry and hunting, they do the same thing. And as I mentioned to folks before, if I could go out on a daily basis and experience a goshawk chasing a ruffed grouse, or a goshawk chasing a jackrabbit, or a kestrel doing the same thing on a regular enough basis to satisfy my need, then I don't think that I would practice the sport of falconry, because I would get my boat floated by the things that I could observe every day. That's why I am a YouTube fiend. I watch everything on YouTube on falconry, and the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone. And in fact, I've written 3 books. One is Understanding Goshawk, about the ecology and training of the goshawk. And the second one, Into the Night, was about the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone. And the sequel, Whence Cometh My Help, is a follow-up on that. So I love wolves. I love raptors. Those are species and conservation efforts that I'm really passionate about. Now, normally here, I ask if there's anyone that has a question before I continue. 1,000, 2,000. Nope.
Yeah, I have a quick question, actually. You mentioned how you apprenticed at the beginning of your falconry career. What is that process like, the process of apprenticing for a couple of years?
Okay. It has changed over the years now that we've gotten more modern and more technologically advanced. But the apprenticeship, as the word applies, is a period where you learn from a master on the techniques and how to do things. And it varies from state to state, the laws that are applicable to anyone wishing to become a falconer. In Massachusetts, you had to apprentice for a 2-year period in order to become a general falconer. Now, if you passed a written test, state and federal, written test, and you had a sponsor, then you could become an apprentice falconer. But along with that sponsor, you had to then go and trap a bird, either a red-tailed hawk or a kestrel, to begin your apprenticeship. In some states now, if I'm not mistaken, apprentices are able to purchase a captive bred raptor. But in those days, you were not. The thought process being, in order to trap a bird, you had to be in the field, you had to be able to identify the species, you had to know the legal dates of when you could or could not trap. And so you had to be more of a naturalist and more of a woodsman, and become more acquainted with the species that you were trying to acquire, as opposed to simply being able to afford one and go buy one. And so I apprenticed with a guy, and he flew Ralph Buscemi, graduated from high school in Shirley, Massachusetts. He got a second shift job at the paper mill there, and he flew his goshawk every day, or a goshawk every day, in season and out, until he retired and moved to Montana. So that was my pretty much my introduction. The first time I went to see Ralph, I had read what I could get my hands on about falconry, which wasn't a lot. But the first time I went to see him, his wife said he's down in the backyard, and as I was walking by, he had a Springer Spaniel that was chained up to a doghouse in his backyard under some trees. And on a stump, there was a bird with one foot stretched out and one leg stretched out. And it was about a 22-day-old goshawk that he had taken from the nest. So I was standing there scared to death. Is the thing going to fly off that stump and gouge my eyes out, or what do I do? But I came to know Ralph, and he agreed to be my sponsor. And he tame hacked his goshawks. It means he took a young from the nest. It was an imprint, and imprinting is, and in birds of prey, there's a blank spot on their brain, and usually the first thing they see move is mama, and 100% of the time in the wild, that is mama. So they're imprinted on that. There were studies done in England back in the 60s where groups of students were given a set of goslings, freshly hatched goslings, and they all wore different colored boots. And they could have 100 goslings out in a pen, and they would walk through there, and the ones that were imprinted on the red boots would follow that student, and it's the other. So it's that practice of identifying what you are by what you see. And in falconry, imprinting has been a technique in the United States. No one has been able to take raptors from the wild in Europe since the turn of the century. So it's not practiced there. And even although captive breeding did allow them to get young birds, their propensity was to let the bird mature and then take it up for training. But if you plan on captive breeding, imprinting is the safest technique, to be able to do that.
Darryl, we have some good questions.
Sure.
Why goshawk over other birds? How do you train a goshawk, and do you have your own bird?
Okay. Let's see. Why a goshawk? Goshawks are very intense. They're one of the three true hawks in North America. The sharp-shinned hawk, which is a bird with short rounded wings and a long tail for quick acceleration and maneuverability in dense cover. You have a bird feeder outside your window so you can enjoy that. And you probably have some ornamental pine trees or firs around. You're really setting that up for a Sharpie. So you're watching the bird feeder, and then poof, you see some feathers come down. Then the Sharpie has made a ray. Now up from the Sharpie, and the Sharpie is a little larger than a blue jay. And up from that is the Cooper's hawk, which is the second true hawk we have in this country. And they're killed by pigeon fanciers like popcorn every year because they raid pigeon lofts. Their time, and the guy turns his pigeons loose at 3 o'clock to get exercise. The Cooper's hawk sitting in a pine tree. No pigeon can out accelerate a Cooper's hawk, so boom, he catches them. Or when the pigeons comes in, our coops will follow them right into the pigeon loft. So the guy goes out there tomorrow, and there's a dead pigeon in there, just one dead pigeon, and there's a Cooper's hawk in there with a crop as big as a softball because he's eating the guy's pigeon. Excuse me. The largest of the true hawks is the goshawk. The Northern Goshawk is the Cipeter gentilis, atricopilus in this country is the normal subspecies that we fly. They're tenacious. They're beautiful. They're capable of taking everything from a passerine bird, and I got to give myself a clap that I didn't say dicky bird, but they are able to catch a passerine bird up to the size of a sage grouse, and a sage grouse is about the size of a hen turkey. And yes, I have a bird. I have a goshawk. Her name is Mercedes. She is a Siberian goshawk. She is white, and she's finishing up the molt late this year, and I haven't been able to pick her up yet. So she's booked wild out in the mew, and in the next week I'm gonna pick her up, and I don't have to man her again. Man is the process of getting the bird gentle and stuff. I don't have to man her again every year because I did it, the first year that I got her, and I actually took my time and did it right. So it's just a matter of me picking her up, getting her used to me for a few days, and getting her weight adjusted. Um, in the summertime, I feed her all she can hold, as many frozen quail and frozen mice and stuff that I buy, on occasional roadkill. So she is way fatter than she would be in the wild. In the wild, she would be sitting eggs, helping the male feed the young, staying active. Well, in captivity, they don't have to do that. So I feed her so much that she doesn't drop her feathers over a period of time that allows her to continue to fly, hunt, and kill and feed her family. Um, it's more condensed in that she just has all this extra fat and clean water and sunlight, and it makes it for accelerated thing. Now, this summer, my daughter was primarily giving her food through a food chute, so I wasn't going in and spending any time with her. And I would have liked to have had her here with you tonight. And if I can tilt my, and I just noticed this out of the corner of my eye, I'm going to tilt my screen up just a little bit. And if you can see that picture, it may not be in focus, but that is a picture of a Siberian goshawk catching a hare in Russia.
So that's a perfect segue to another question, which is how North American falconry is different from falconry in other countries.
It's okay. It's not really. The basic concepts are the same. We control the bird by its weight. Now, we have terms of hunting weight, and that means that a bird that's at hunting weight will actively pursue, chase, and try to catch some quarry. One that's hog fat will not. So that leaves a lot of people to think, oh, you starve the bird down, it has to go catch something. And I say, no. Any idiot can get a bird and mistreat it by starvation. But that's not what you're after. What you're after is this bird to be the equivalent to its wild counterpart. They fly every day. Every day that a raptor lives, something else must die. Now, that's not entirely true because they go days without eating. And life is a big incentive for them to eat some carrion that they normally would. So a goshawk, rather than starve to death, will eat about anything. But for the most part, they hunt and kill something every day, or every other day. And what's different is the traditions of falconry. For example, in Japan, you have a master falconer, and you have those that are apprenticing under him, and he will take them out. And the bird that they typically fly is a goshawk. And for day after day, he will take the bird and fling it to one of his apprentices, who will get the bird on the fist, and it will eat something, a tidbit, and she flings it back to him. And that's how they train, day and night and day and night, like that. In the Middle Ages, falconry was very popular during the Middle Ages after the Crusades. With the advent of the rifle or gun, its popularity, it waned quite a bit. No longer was the goshawk or peregrine needed to get food on the table. You could do that with, you could do that quite easily with a gun instead. But the aristocrats of the day, they would get a peregrine falcon or a goshawk, and they would have a servant keep it awake forever. One guy would have it on his fist for 8 hours, be passed on to another guy, and then when the bird was near exhaustion, when it could do nothing else, and it would always be offered food, but of course it would be afraid to put its head down um, and eat something. And so what they did was they just wore its resistance down over time, so it had no choice but to eat. And when it did, it was kind of exhausted, and then they would rub it, and this process would get the bird really, really tame. Um, in China, it is almost a raptor of the family. Everybody in there, touches it, feels it, holds on to it. And this came from the origins in Mongolia. There are some people that say that falconer was born in the steppes of Mongolia. We know that Genghis Khan was a falconer, and all the great Khans, those that invaded Russia, there are folks that say that it was introduced in Russia by the conquering Khans that came through. But if you watch any of the nature programs now on YouTube about Mongolia falconry, and you see them in Kazakhstan or whatever, and they're in the huts, and there's a golden eagle sitting right there. And there's a little kid right here. There's a golden eagle right here, and there's a mom's cooking stuff, and it's just a family atmosphere. This bird is growing up in the confines of a family. Now, here in the United States, things have progressed a little bit differently. When I got my first goshawk, it was an imprint, and now with imprints, you get what some consider bad behavior. You get mantling, the hiding of the food, or you get screaming, which is a natural occurrence in the wild. When mama comes to the nest with food, it's the one that screams the loudest, that gets fed. So if you take an imprint, if you get a bird from the nest less than 16 days, or you buy one from a captive breeder and you bring it home, your goal is try to have a bird grow up and develop without these vices. Um, what I found, and my preference was to get a passage bird, a bird that was trapped on passage in the wild. See, in North America, you cannot trap an adult bird. That's part of the breeding population. And passage birds, their mortality rate is upwards of 80-some%. They starve, they're hit by cars, they drown, they're eaten by other predators, you name it. So the birds that are taken a while for falconry have no negligible impact on the wild population. You can't compute it. But so with captive breeding, my preference is to get a bird that was raised by its parents rather than get an imprint. And I found that I can get the same level of tameness with a chamber raised bird or a bird trapped from the wild that someone can with an imprint. Now, part of that is due to technology. Before my book, most passage birds or birds that were captive bred and chamber raised, they were handled the same way they were in Europe. I got an idea to do it differently, and I thought that, wow, I've discovered a whole new way of doing this. But later on, as I was reading, a guy in Europe way back when did the same thing. And another guy in China, had did the same thing. I came upon this method on my own, but I wasn't the first to do it. It's been done. So therefore, it kind of legitimized it and made sense to me. And what this technique was I watched Buck Buchanan. You guys, many of you have seen The Horse Whisperer. Have you seen that movie with Robert Redford? some years ago. Well, the guy that worked on that movie with him was the horse whisperer, a guy named Buck Buchanan. And instead of breaking horses, his concept was starting them. You get them in a round pen, you get them used to stuff. He desensitizes them while raising flags and shouting at them. And so, in my book on the chapter on training passage goshawks, in the beginning, I used to tell my grandkids, be quiet, don't move fast, you're going to scare the bird. Well, all that's out the window. Shout as long as you turn the radio up, make as much noise as you can. And when they encounter this stuff, when you're out hunting or you're out in the field, then it won't be as stressful for them. And we strive for less stress and more health. See, if you can get your bird to be the same as that bird in the wild, you trap a goshawk in December, so she's been feeding herself all this time, and you feel her pectoral muscles, it's concave. There's muscles built up on each side of the kill. So she's been getting good quality food and she's been getting a lot of exercise. A bird that's starving, its kill is like the kill of a boat. There's nothing there. You trap one of those, you want to treat it and get some nutrition in it and get it back into the wild. But I'd say the main difference is just the traditions. The basic ethics of falconry haven't changed over time. More questions? Another one? Okay.
Oh, sorry, Darryl. There is another question. I missed
Sure.
it. Has falconry become more popular in recent years? And do you know about how many falconers there are out there in the US or worldwide?
Worldwide, I don't. NAFA is the North American Falconers Association. It currently has about 2,500 to 3,000 members. Excuse me, not every falconer is a member of NAFA. California has the largest number of falconers, and I think they got 600 or 700. Yeah, and it's been years. I was a past president of NAFA, but that's been years and years ago, so I'm not up on the numbers. But yes, it has gained in popularity, and that's only because of exposure through social media, YouTube, and that kind of stuff. But it's still relatively expensive in that you have to build a place for your bird to be, and that's lumber, time, and money, or expertise, or pay for having that built. And the bloom wears off of it quickly. A lot of people are enchanted by the thought of having a bird on their fist, and that is a good thing to aspire to, in my opinion. However, when they get down to the nitty gritty of taking care of it day and night, of not being able to just get up and go on vacation, you can't call the kennel and say, we're going to go to a Yellowstone for 2 weeks and I want to bring the dogs by. Yeah, there's nothing like that. So the requirements are not for the faint of heart. I say that falconry is not a hobby of mine. It's a way of life. I drive the kind of car that I drive. I live where I live. I do the type of work that I do. Now that I'm an old man, the warden has told me that my focus needs to be on grandkids and the lawn rather than going west of the Mississippi River every year to go hunting. But it has always been a way of life for me.
Can you talk a little bit about the time investment when you get a bird? Just, what do you have to do? For you, it's a way of life, but is it just kind of can it be a side hobby for other people, or is it kind of an all or nothing proposition?
It can be a side hobby for others. I frown on that myself, but but it can be. And the thing with and that was one of the beauties or of of trapping, which in the States we are allowed to do. I mentioned that the mortality rate was near 80-85% for first year raptors. So you trap a bird in September, you fly it for the year, um, you turn it loose in January or February. It's made it through the roughest part of the winter. It knows how to hunt and kill. And so you've probably helped that particular bird out a little bit. But the time constraints depend on what type bird you have and the species and what your ultimate goal is. Let's say that I'm an apprentice falconer and I trap a red-tailed hawk. Um, now I can trap a bird and have it flying free in 2 weeks. Now, is that bird really trustworthy in 2 weeks? No, it isn't. Um, and so, although that is something that experienced falconers are capable of doing, to my mind, it's foolish to do so because you're shortchanging the bird and you're shortchanging the sport as well. The time it takes to get a bird and to have it to be trustworthy so that you don't have to starve it to get it to chase quarry and it responds to you well, again, without having to have its weight reduced a lot, is whatever time that takes. If there's 3 weeks or if there's 2 months, in the end, you want a hunting companion that is robust and healthy, that responds to you and is a pleasure to be with and to hunt with. Now you can cut corners on time and you can get something that isn't that. But for me, that's not what I'm and not what I'm after.
Thanks, Darryl. What do you do if a bird flies off?
Ask people to help you look for it. Now, I said that tongue in cheek, but now we have telemetry now. We have modern technology. So I can put a transmitter on a bird that will last for 30 days and then is good within 10 or 15 miles. And there are different variations of that. I can get one, that has a range of 30 miles, but because of battery drain, it's only good for 5 days. So with your goshawk, it's going to the next tree line. It's not going 100 miles away from. So I fly with two transmitters. I fly with a long range transmitter that is good for 20 miles. It's going to die in 5 to 10 days. And then I fly with one that's only good for 5 miles, but it's going to last a month. So it's able, and I've lost birds, and found them and got them back after 2 days. But it was because I had telemetry. Another way we lose, segueing into losing birds, another way we lose birds is birds being killed by wild raptors. See, when we go hunting, we're hunting, and if we're at a place that has quarry, squirrels, rabbits, ducks, pheasants, whatever, we're hunting in somebody else's territory. And so you do that at the risk. I go to a field, in Kansas, where I hunt, there's not a lot of trees. But I still stop and check the area, and I check the telephone lines because there could be a ferruginous hawk, a golden eagle, a bald eagle out there. And so you have to be careful. I've lost birds and chase the pheasant, caught it at the edge of the woodlot, and by the time I get there, a horned owl is sitting on my bird or a ferruge or something, and that just goes with the sport.
Can you tell us just a very brief favorite memory or story about flying your goshawk?
Oh, wow, there's so many. I guess Yes, uh, I got a goshawk in 1976 from my friend Victor Hardiswick from Centerville, South Dakota. He sent her to me in July, and there's stringent criteria for shipping pets depending on the heat and stuff. So we had a small window, and as it were, she flew into Atlanta. We had the bomb threat at the Olympics, and she was on the tarmac for 2 days. Now she was 30 some days old, and he put food in there for her, but well, birds of prey can have what's known as hunger streaks, and it's a period where that feather was not getting sufficient nutrition, nutrition, so it didn't grow. And there's a weak spot all the way across that. And so my goshawk, which I named Atlanta due to that whole circumstances, um, when I got her, she had hunger streaks all the way across the tail, and they broke off. Um, and I use a technique that's called imping. It's where you take feathers from another bird and you replace the damaged feathers with those. And so I had Atlanta, which was a Finnish goshawk. She was huge. Um, she flew at 46 ounces, which for a goshawk is really big. North American goshawks fly at 29 ounces or 30 ounces. In New England, we'd get some of the larger birds and they'd fly at 33 or 34. And Atlanta flew at 3 pounds, so she was a monster. And so the first time I went hawking with her, I had flown, uh, trained her at a reserve in Massachusetts where they had just tons of pheasant out there. Now, these were pheasant that were raised and they were released for, it was a shooting preserve, but you had a section that he didn't allow shooting in. And so a lot of those semi-wild pheasants congregated, and this area was about 4 or 5 acres. And so I would go there um, with my bird dog, and I'd find those pheasants, flush them, and they flew strong. So she would chase and fly them, and catch them. And so when we went out west, um, the first day I went out to out to a jack field, and I had never seen a jackrabbit before. And then we went walking this field, and one got up, and I said, "Oh God, it's the size of a small dog," and it just kind of loped away. And I told one guy, I said, "I'm going to stack these things up like cardwood." He said, "What?" I said, "Oh, Atlanta's going to slay these things left and right." So I remember the first time I went out in the field, I had her on the fist. She was at 46 and a half ounces. I had her an ounce and a half lower than what I had been flying. The jackrabbit got up and she left the fist and she was pumping towards boom, 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 boom. And then she veered off and got in a tree. She wanted nothing to do with it. And I said, "Come on." I flushed maybe 8 or 9 more. And I said, "Well, she's never seen the jack." When that happens, your excuses start coming out, and I had a plethora of excuses that I was bantying about. And that was in Kansas. The NAFA meet was in Lenoir, Colorado. And so by the time I got to Lenoir, I had her down to 44 ounces, which was more in line where she needed to be for jacks. Now that's just a 2 ounce, 2.5 ounce difference from when she totally refused them. And so Atlanta at 46 ounces, she would starve. Atlanta at 46 ounces, she would starve at 35 ounces. At 35 ounces, that would be too low for her. And so I had her at 44 ounces. I had a whole lot of cushion to go through, but there were falconers from Minnesota. And at the time, there were not a lot of Finnish goshawks being flown in this country. In fact, Atlanta was the first one. My friend Victor Hardiswick imported her from Finland, and I was to fly her until she became breeding age. And so the club from Minnesota said, invited me to go out with them, and I said, "Look, she hasn't caught anything. I don't know how she's going to do it." And they said, "Well, we'll give her an opportunity because we got to field this loaded with jacks." And so we went out there, and as we were walking, she baited, which is to try to fly away. I released her. I thought she was going after a jack, and she flew out into the field. She did a shot up in the air. I did a wing over and came down, and I thought I had called a jack. And so I go running up there, and I slide down, and I see a short tail going down her mouth. She's called a short tail vole. My 46-ounce finished goshawk, a dragon, has just gulped down uh, a tiny little vole. However, that little act turned her on, because the next jack that got up, she rolled it at 50 yards. And by the time we all got there, the jack was dead. And I was the happiest human on the face of this earth. That was my first jack, and it's still the same. And I've been a falconer for, oh gosh, since 1981. And let's see, the most jacks I've ever caught in a season was 11. And this is from October to just before Christmas. So I did a lot of flying, did a lot of chasing, but actually her grabbing and catching one and holding on is few and far between. But it's, why I practice the sport. I get to see all those flights and witness all that stuff. And that's what does it for me.
That's a great story. Your passion comes through.
Yeah.
So two people have told us that they have some experience with flying. Let's see, we've Aaron, who says, I'm currently a general falconer in Massachusetts. Where were those pheasant, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, sure. It's in they're in Uxbridge. It's a reserve. If you go, what is the name? They're out in Bill Johnson. Ask them if they know Bill Johnson.
Yeah, I know Bill.
Okay, well, ask Bill.
All right, I will. We're actually having our club picnic on Sunday, so I'll see him Sunday.
Oh, where's it at?
It's at my house actually. I'm hosting.
Oh, okay. And this is who?
This is Aaron from Massachusetts.
Aaron who? Do I know?
Shanley.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've been gone for 7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll ask Bill. Thanks.
Oh yeah.
So just a comment, says I flew castrals in the early 60s. I trained myself from library books. They're fun and easy to trap and train, but a goshawk, wow. Lots of great feedback here. One last question in the chat is, what kind of a hunting dog do you have? And can you talk a little bit about how you use the dog and the bird together?
Yeah, absolutely. I have I breed Vizslas, and my grandfather trained pointing dogs for people, primarily English pointers, and every now and then an occasional English setter. And so I've had absolutely no use for any other breed other than an English pointer. And I make fun of and tease my field trial friends that the English setters nowadays have so much English pointer in them that you can't tell them apart. My wife and daughter went to a wedding, and wherever they were, the people had they had a Vizsla. And so that night, it pushed their door open with its nose and came in and hopped up on the bed with them. Well, they found religion and they wanted a Vizsla. And I said, no, I'm not having any kind of lap dog, that lays around on your lap all the time. If I got a dog, it's going to be a working dog. It's going to be a pointing dog, yada, yada, yada. And a friend of mine sent me a video of flying Finnish goshawks in the UK, and he had a Vizsla. So he goes out in the field with this Vizsla, and the thing points. He steps on the bush, and a blue hare gets up. Goshawk chases it and catches that hare. And then the next day he's in a different field. The dog goes on point. He tells it to flush. It flushes a pheasant. Goshawk catches the pheasant. The next day he's on a little pond and he sends this weasel in, and like a lab, it dives in the pond. Duck gets up. Goshawk catches it. I found religion, and I've been a Wiesler person ever since. And I use my Wiesler when I go out rest to point jacks. Now that's frowned upon in the bird dog world, particularly field trialing. That's called pointing trash. But yeah, but my boy Troy, he'll point jacks just as well as pheasant and quail.
Is it possible that there are jackrabbits around here? Someone says that people used to talk about the large rabbits on the Rensselaer Plateau by Berlin Mountain.
There were in Massachusetts, the Greyhound folks imported jacks from Arizona and Texas, and they released them on Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. And it's been years and years since I've been there. But we did find a dead jack on the beach once, and there were jack droppings that we saw. And I'm told that around the airport that, at night that you could steal one or two. Now, the European brown hares, I know that there were some hunt clubs in New Jersey in years past, and they had released some European brown hare there because a friend of mine, probably 10 or 15 years ago, she caught one. She caught a European brown hare with a couple of hares hawks. But those are the only occasions that I know of jackrabbits or hares. The jack is not a rabbit, it's a hare. It's precocious. The babies are born with their eyes open, fully furred, unlike rabbits that are helpless and blind when they're born. But those are the only two cases of hares being east of the Mississippi that I know of.
So it's after the hour. I think we're getting ready to wrap up. If anyone has any more questions, or Darryl, if there's anything that you weren't asked or that you didn't have time to tell us about that is critical for our understanding, or that you just like to share.
Yeah, I have one question. What's the fastest bird?
Anybody want to put their guesses in the chat? Hummingbird.
Oh no, that's quickest. I mean fastest.
Trick question. The peregrine.
That would be a good answer because we've all told that the peregrine can dive in a stoop in upwards of 200 miles an hour.
The ostrich, the goshawk.
No, actually, it's the gyrfalcon, GYR. The gyrfalcon is Falco rustiolus. It's the largest falcon. They're as large as red tails. They're in Greenland and Iceland and the Canadian tundra, and we're often talk about the peregrine falcon, and it's known primarily because of its susceptibility to DDT. And then after, through conservation efforts, the peregrine is back and thriving. But the gyrfalcon is actually faster. Gyrs live in Greenland and Iceland, which is really a large Icelandic desert. There's not a lot of moisture stuff there. There's not a lot of cover there for surprise attacks. So a gyr sees a duck flying quarter of a mile away, it jumps up and flies it down. In nature, speed is normally equated with size. Saluki is faster than a greyhound. Thoroughbred is faster than a quarter horse, although the one may be quicker than the other. But in actual speed, the larger bird normally wins out. There's nothing as quick as a sharp-shinned hawk. They can be off the fist on the ground and back up, in the blink of an eye. You can hardly see that with the naked eye. And the Cooper's hawk off the fist, they're dynamic, but neither one are as fast as a goshawk. See, a goshawk is larger, stronger. Their top speed is faster, and they're able to maintain that top speed due to superior strength for a longer period of time. And speed is distance traveled over time, so therefore you equate the goshawk is faster. And something that I never would have admitted to or believed or spoken aloud is that a golden eagle is faster than a goshawk. I said, oh, absolutely not. Them big old lumbering things. Well, but if you think about it, they have to move a lot of air to stay aloft. And with that one push of air, a golden eagle is way out there. And I've been in the field where I was flying my goshawk, not at the same time with those things, because they are dragons. You know, in 50 yards, in the 75 yards, I thought, my goodness, golden eagle is faster than a goshawk. You don't think that because of the size, but they actually are. So there you have it.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the stories, and everyone's had a great time. Great feedback in the chat.
Good.
I think we're at time. Everyone says thank you so much. So thank you, Darryl, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening.
Great, fantastic. It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Darryl. It was wonderful.
Good, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
This was so great. I learned so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Good
much.
keeping out there.
So that's it. We're done.
Yeah, I don't know if you've been seeing the chat, but everyone says, thanks. This was really great. I learned so much. This was awesome. Great storytelling.
Oh, good.
Great